B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Tuesday, February 6, 2018. Do you spend much time on YouTube? Well, I host a podcast. This podcast is posted every day on YouTube. And when I go there, it is a bit of a time sink, a very seductive experience. But there's a whole lot of disinformation served up on an hourly basis at YouTube. And there is a really significant new report at The Guardian newspaper. It was published yesterday, February 5th, written by Paul Lewis, based here in San Francisco. And the headline reads, "Fiction is outperforming reality. How YouTube's algorithm distorts truth." And I want to say here from the outset that this is a very important story that shows the influence of YouTube that is largely off the radar of most major media outlets, our political leaders, and the average American. And I have for a long time been aware of the community, if you will, that populates YouTube from the comments that I've gotten on various podcasts and video reports that I've posted on YouTube over the years. And the audience is vicious. It is snarky. It is very almost anarchistic. And so what I'm about to tell you fits with my own experience and, frankly, my bias about YouTube. So what we are learning is that the algorithm at YouTube is intended to serve you increasingly aggressive content that is aimed at the algorithm's perception of your interests. And over time, when you use YouTube a lot, they figure out whether you like horse races or not, whether you like yachts or not, whether you like puppies. You get the idea. And so they build a database on you as a user. And last night, after I read this article, I went to YouTube and I didn't search for anything. I just accepted what was on the homepage. I clicked on one video, and then take a look at the videos that get lined up in the right margin, the on-deck circle. This is what the algorithm thinks you want to see. And it gives you a range of things. I recently watched some music videos of the Doors. And so in between news and other stuff, there were 2 clips of the Doors given to me in my Up Next stack. But along with it was a lot of stuff of questionable value, and as I say, it gets increasingly salacious or aggressive in trying to figure out what you will click on next. And the whole goal is just to increase watch time. Because the more you watch, the more ads YouTube can serve, and the more money they can make. So there are 2 figures who play into this article. One is a widely respected technology critic named Zeynep Tufekci. He says YouTube is the most overlooked story of 2016. Its search and recommender algorithms are misinformation engines. And the other figure who is central to this article is Guillaume Chaslot, a 36-year-old French computer programmer with a PhD in artificial intelligence. He worked at Google for 3 years as an engineer. He was assigned to YouTube, and in case you don't know, Google bought YouTube a few years ago. And then, to be fair, Chaslot was fired. I don't know exactly why. But he says YouTube is something that looks like reality, but it is distorted to make you spend more time online. The recommendation algorithm is not optimizing for what is truthful or balanced or healthy for democracy. He says he was fired in 2013 over performance issues, but he says he was let go after agitating for change inside the company. And he developed his own software system to monitor the selections offered by YouTube's algorithm, and he was able to map it out. And here's what is really astounding. He said wherever you started, whether it was from a Trump search or a Clinton search, the recommendation algorithm was much more likely to push you in a pro-Trump direction. And in fact, the ratio was 6-1 overall in favor of Trump. Now, the author of the article, the journalist, examined a list of more than 8,000 videos that had showed in the Up Next column on 12 dates between August and November of 2016, at the height of the election, after equal numbers of searches for Trump and Clinton. And what they discovered was a lot of kind of generic stuff, people putting up Saturday Night Live sketches, clips from a debate, clips from a news program. But what was most compelling was how often the software detected anti-Clinton conspiracy videos of Hillary having a mental breakdown, reporting she had syphilis or Parkinson's, accusing her of having secret sexual relationships, including with Yoko Ono. Now, that's been out there for a long time. Many were even darker, fabricating the contents of WikiLeaks disclosures to make unfounded claims, including the Pizzagate stuff. So, in the final analysis of the remaining 643 videos, after they culled through the generic ones, 551 favored Trump, while only 92 favored the Clinton campaign. YouTube was 6 times more likely to recommend videos that aided Trump than his adversary. Now, was this a political statement by Larry and Sergey, the do-no-evil owners of Google, the founders, in fact? I don't know. Was it purely profiteering? Does the algorithm just follow the prurient interests, almost on a, like the mind of a pornographer, to see what they can dangle in front of you that you'll click on next? YouTube issued a statement. It appears as if The Guardian is attempting to shoehorn research, data, and their conclusions into a common narrative about the role of technology in last year's election. The reality of how our systems work, however, simply don't support this premise. Well, then explain how your system works so that we can understand that we have nothing to fear from YouTube. Now, the last thing I'll mention on this is there is not a single hint of any foreign involvement. Russian government, Russian bots, any of that stuff. And the creators of content who The Guardian tracked down are all Americans who just figured out how to feed the algorithm so it would feed page views so they would make more money. So this is a very serious issue. And again, this is overlooked by the hysteria over Russian meddling, Putin's personally selecting what was sent to WikiLeaks from the alleged hack of the DNC. And all of that is so insignificant. The earlier claims of gaming of Facebook, paid Facebook ads, Twitter bots. None of that, in my view, has near the impact of what YouTube did in 2016. And I invite you to go spend an hour at YouTube and just do what I did. Go to the home page, see what they serve up, click on a video. When you get tired of that, look at what's in the Up Next stack, and you will see how the algorithm tries to read your interests and your intentions. And it doesn't take you to places that are going to make you a better person or make the world a better place. It is predatory. And Senator Mark Warner, who I think is part of the Russiagate hysteria, is warning that YouTube's powerful recommendation algorithm may be optimizing for outrageous, salacious, and often fraudulent content and susceptible to manipulation by bad actors. And that is a worthy concern. Now, meanwhile, at Facebook, they have made the third change in the last 3 weeks in their algorithms. And I want you to know my source for what I'm about to tell you is the World Socialist website. And the language they use is a little bit shrill, but I think it's very accurate. Facebook CEO and billionaire Mark Zuckerberg announced January 29 that the social media platform will prioritize news from local sources in the news feed displayed to users. The announcement is the third in a creeping rollout of updates announced by Facebook since the start of the year, aimed at censoring online information. On January 12, Facebook reported it would deprioritize news and political content, that is, display them less often, in favor of personal moments. And I like puppies. I like your kitten. But I've noticed a proliferation of pet photos in recent weeks, more food shots. But I am still getting from my core group of Facebook friends a lot of good information, including this article from the World Socialist website, which was suggested to me on Facebook by Carl Howard. So it's not a complete shutdown, but they are filtering more consistently. So Zuck announced that they are going to be trying to do hyper-local coverage, and that you will be increasingly seeing links to articles from news in your own geographical area. Now, the problem with that is that local newspapers have cut back on local reporting. And so there was that effort by AOL a few years ago, Patch, it was called Patch, where they'd hire, retired professional journalists and have them do local coverage. That didn't work out. And so there's a big gap where local TV stations only cover murders and police activity. And so there's a great deal of local news that just never gets covered anymore. So I'd like to ask my listeners for advice here. I'm really torn because I don't believe that I'm so powerful that if I protest or boycott YouTube, that it will make any difference to them. And likewise, Facebook has over a billion users, and Peter B. Collins exiting will not make any difference. But if you have any ideas of how we can take collective action to get the attention and let them know that their profits are at risk and their ability to mine our personal data will not be afforded them if they don't honor our privacy demands and the interests that we have. Yesterday, I led the podcast with my concerns about the FISA court and my sense that it should be shut down. There is no place for a secret court that only hears from one side of a dispute in the American system. And I referred to an April 2017, partly redacted FISA court document signed by the presiding judge, Rosemary Collyer. And I relayed that I had seen it over the weekend. I read every page. And then when I went back to try to find it, the link had been removed. Well, two intrepid listeners, and we'll just refer to them as John and George, they sent me a link to the Scribd page where this document is available. And so today I am linking in the show file for the podcast to Scribd, where you can read this 99-page ruling for yourselves. And you will see the back and forth about minimization, about surveillance, about the long-running failures of the NSA, the CIA, and the FBI to deal honestly with the FISA court, and that despite all this, Rosemary Collyer approved the continuation of virtually all the programs that are currently underway. And I did mention that if the document refers to Carter Page, that part is redacted, so I can't quite connect it in that manner. Donald Trump told us recently that he'd really, really like to sit down, and he'd even be willing to talk under oath with Special Counsel Bob Mueller and his investigators. But he added the caveat, the lawyers and everything. Duh. So now the lawyers, as expected, with one exception, are telling Trump that he should not participate in any conversation with Bob Mueller or his employees. And quoting from the New York Times, his lawyers are concerned that the president, who has a history of making false statements and contradicting himself, could be charged with lying to investigators. Do you think? The one exception is that Ty Cobb, who is paid for by the government but is focusing on the Trump-Russia and special counsel issues in the White House, he appears to believe that Trump should do it. I think it's way too risky. Neil Katyal, who's a Democrat, was Solicitor General for a while during the Obama administration. He said the upshot of the Nixon tapes case was that any president is going to have an extremely hard time resisting a request from a law enforcement officer. In general, presidents do sit for interviews or respond to requests from prosecutors because they take their constitutional responsibility to faithfully execute the laws seriously. Well, that certainly doesn't apply here. Yesterday, the House Intelligence Committee voted unanimously, yeah, that is amazing, to release the Democratic rebuttal to the Nunes memo that came out last Friday. And because it refers to classified information, which is a joke, the memo is routed through the White House that can redact things or even refuse to release the memo if it decides that way. And last night on television, I think it was Rachel Maddow's show, I saw Congressman Eric Swalwell, a Democrat from here in the Bay Area, a former local prosecutor who serves on the Intelligence Committee and is part of the Adam Schiff wing promoting the whole Trump-Russia imbroglio. And I actually heard Eric Swalwell say that the classified information in the 3.5-page Nunes document, the memo, is identifying Christopher Steele, and that he worked for MI6. I mean, that is so ludicrous. That has been publicly known for over a year. And the idea that they can play these high and mighty games and say, oh, this fatal damage to American national security and secrecy by releasing classified information. It's just a big pile of bullshit. At any rate, this same committee has been the subject of a no-show by Steve Bannon. He had been subpoenaed to appear today at the House Intelligence Committee, and he has declined or defied the subpoena. I heard a radio report that he is looking for a different date, but the ground rules he's insisted on are non-starters. He wants to be able to answer yes or no to 14 questions and then go take a shower or something. I don't know. Yesterday, Trump went to my hometown, Cincinnati, Ohio, to Blue Ash, to a factory where he grandstanded about people getting a $1,000 bonus because of his new tax giveaway to the wealthy and to corporations. And as he basked in the glow of his fans, Trump, of course, goes off script, and he starts talking about the State of the Union speech, how the Democrats sat on their hands. He suggested that was un-American. And then apparently somebody from the crowd shouted treason, and he said, oh, yeah, we can call it treason. I mean, it was just so casual to use such a singularly serious claim. Treason is not something to be laughed at. And what Trump is suggesting also misdefines the meaning of treason. But after that, Tammy Duckworth, the Illinois senator who lost both of her legs as she served in our military, she said, you know, we don't live in a dictatorship or monarchy. I swore an oath in the military and the Senate to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, not to mindlessly cater to the whims of Cadet Bone Spurs and clap when he demands I clap. Now, Cadet Bone Spurs is her nickname for Trump, who used bone spurs as the reason for medical deferments from the Vietnam-era draft. Neener. I hate Twitter. It's really just people trading barbs and insults, and I find it pretty juvenile. And Trump took to Twitter this morning, and there's so many things that he could comment on if he wanted to. But he was probably, as usual, watching Fox and Friends. And there is a report that an NFL player who was on the team of the Indianapolis Colts, Edwin Jackson, age 26, was killed early Super Bowl Sunday morning at 4 a.m. in an auto accident. And Trump sent out a tweet, and we barely have the facts on this auto accident. Jackson was being driven in a ride-sharing car. We don't know if it was Uber or Lyft. He and his driver were both killed in an accident that involved an undocumented immigrant who is accused of being intoxicated at the time of the accident, a DUI. That's all we know. And that's all Trump needs to know. To tweet, "So disgraceful that a person illegally in our country killed Colts linebacker Edwin Jackson. This is just one of many such preventable tragedies. We must get the Dems to get tough on the border and with illegal immigration fast." Now, we don't even know the status of Manuel Orrego Zavala, who is the accused driver of the other car. And Trump is already assuming that he's illegal and that a border wall and an end to chain migration would have prevented this. And maybe he's got more information than I do, but I doubt it. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. And there are a lot of great people out there. I really am touched by Del Leonard, who just dropped a check from Maine the other day. And also people who sign up on PayPal, Brian Mazzy, Jerry White, Kevin Beckley. I'd like you to join their ranks. Come on over to peterbcollins.com, click on the menu button, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page. And if you're allergic to PayPal, you can always just mail me a check, a money order, or cash works too. My P.O. Box is number 150660, San Rafael, California, 94915. That's Box 150-660, San Rafael, 94915. And despite my rant about YouTube, if you go to YouTube and listen to my podcast, please do, and click on the subscribe button. I'm trying to beef up my subscribers so I can get my share of that YouTube cash. Now, here's something that, to my knowledge, Trump has not bothered to tweet about. We have another egregious contracting failure in Puerto Rico after the Hurricane Maria. FEMA gave a contract to Tiffany Brown, an Atlanta entrepreneur with no experience in large-scale disaster relief and at least 5 prior canceled government contracts. They gave her a $156 million contract to provide meals for the hungry survivors in Puerto Rico. They ordered 30 million meals. And at the time they finally canceled the contract, 50,000 of about 18 million expected meals had actually been delivered, and they botched the whole thing. They didn't follow the rules and deliver packages that could be easily consumed. And this isn't the only case. We know about that, what was the group, White, they were from Montana. There were 2 guys, and they got the FEMA contract to restore power in Puerto Rico. And this is just emblematic of the cronyism and corruption in Trump's world. And we will continue to see the impact of it. It's been a wild ride for the stock market since Friday. Trump had been bragging about how he had created trillions of dollars in value for investors. Yesterday, the largest drop by numbers, not the historically largest percentage drop of the Dow. And this morning, the market opened and it immediately went down by more than 500 points. Then it came back up, and it fluctuated across 900 points during the first hour of trading. And then the drugs kicked in, and the selling eased, and the market closed up 2.3% from yesterday's low. Now, one set of investors believe that the sell-off is a result of an economy that they believe will overheat because of the tax cuts and because of the slow growth in wages. Now, they're claiming that the employment numbers and the modest bump in hourly wages reported for January was part of the 666-point sell-off on Friday. So I don't particularly believe this, but I'm reporting what they say. The other interesting little tidbit here that surfaced last week is that nobody calculated the immediate impact of the Trump tax cuts on the federal treasury. And because in many cases people will be able to pay less in payroll deductions into the treasury starting this month, and because February through May are the periods when most people redeem their tax refunds from the IRS, the government has less than $300 billion cash on hand at the Treasury Department. And this puts pressure on the need to raise the debt ceiling, which is anathema to the Tea Party, Freedom Caucus, real nutballs in the House. Combine that with the latest kick-the-can-down-the-road deadline, which is Thursday midnight for a government shutdown if there's no continuing resolution. And couple that with the Republicans trying to ram past the Democrats a temporary spending bill that will fully fund the Pentagon. And I've talked about this before. The Democrats do not have strong moral ground to stand on here. Instead of demanding cuts to the Pentagon budget to bump up domestic spending, including for infrastructure, which Trump offers no payment plan for, the Democrats are saying, no, we want to boost defense spending, but we want to boost domestic spending by the same amount. The Democrats will not win that fight, and Trump this time appears to be eager for a government shutdown. Supreme Court has ruled that the state of Pennsylvania should proceed to redraw its congressional districts, which are heavily gerrymandered. I'm happy to hear that, but this is the same court that denied North Carolina the opportunity to redraw its gerrymandered districts in time for the upcoming primaries. Well, it's the good news, bad news thing. Michael Foster is the heroic man from Seattle who I interviewed as one of the valve turners a few weeks ago. And he was part of a coordinated direct action campaign, and he personally broke into a cage, turned the valve to shut down the Keystone Pipeline that was pumping crude tar sands effluent from Canada into the United States. And today he was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but 2 years are described as deferred. Now, what I think that means is it's a tighter form of probation, and the judge fears that he will do this again if he's released, and that way she could put him back in jail immediately on this existing sentence if he did reoffend in legal terms after he is released after 1 year incarcerated. She did acknowledge how unusual the case is, says she spent many hours, her name is Fontaine, Judge Fontaine, spent many hours thinking about the sentence. She acknowledged the seriousness of climate change, says North Dakota culture is about taking care of the land. But since the necessity defense was not upheld in this case, she recommends a marketing campaign to educate people about climate change. Really? Maybe Michael Foster can run that marketing campaign from federal prison. Over at the Smog Blog, our friend Steve Horn has a new detailed report on people who last year at this time were working in the energy sector for President Obama. People like Heather Zakal, former top White House climate and energy staffer. Well, she now sits on the board of directors of Cheniere and was named managing director of corporate engagement for the environmental group called the Nature Conservancy. Nature Conservancy works both sides of the street. They actually own an oil well in Texas, and they use the earnings to fund their environmental programs. and both members of both BP and Chevron sit on the Business Council of the Nature Conservancy. And Heather Zakal was part of the group that secured a what is it? It's a special deal with China National Petroleum for the export of American natural gas. Then there's Eben Burnham Snyder, who is now a Cheniere spokesperson, formerly worked for the Obama administration as Director of Public Affairs for the Department of Energy. Amos Hochstein works for an offshoot of Cheniere, Tellurian, which is a natural gas exporting company. He was the coordinator for international energy affairs for the Obama administration. I've linked to the article so you can learn more about other individuals who have gone through the same revolving door and are now working for the extractors and exporters. There was a big purge at Newsweek and the International Business Times yesterday, and David Sirota, who is an accomplished journalist and a credible reporter who I've known for many years, he was among many people who resigned, but that was after top editors were fired, apparently for trying to expose the murky ownership structure behind International Business Times, which purchased Newsweek magazine, I believe, in 2013. And Mother Jones has been able to report that IBT Media has ties to Olivet University, a Christian college here in California, that's part of a sect referred to as the Community. And so Newsweek editors who were trying to report on Newsweek were fired. And that takes care of that, eh? Julian Assange remains trapped at the Embassy of Ecuador in London. A British judge upheld the arrest warrant for Assange today, and the next court session is going to be on February 13th, where they will review briefs once again to see if there's a way out for the WikiLeaks founder. And finally today, the U.S. is quietly shifting thousands of troops that have been in Iraq to Afghanistan. And I point this out because Trump doesn't announce these things. He'd prefer to tweet against a member of Congress. But this is really significant because Trump claimed that Obama pulled our troops out of Iraq too early and to too much of an extreme and allowed the Islamic State to rise. It's not really true. Obama tried to keep more troops in Iraq, but was rebuffed by our hand-picked leader there. And then he basically just reverted to the plan that George W. Bush had put in place for U.S. withdrawal from Iraq back in 2007. And so Trump is now shifting about half of the 8,800 troops in Iraq over to Afghanistan. And once again, yawns are the basic reaction here in the U.S. of A. Thanks for listening to my News and Comment podcast. This is the one you can find on YouTube, and click that subscribe button if you don't mind. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.